Julie doesn't work in UWS, she's a visitor. But Julie Watson and I worked together a long time ago, and it's an absolute delight to have Julie here today. We have been really influenced by your work. Julie recently finished her PhD, and it's become actually quite a central part in our thinking in My Home Life, so thank you, and we really look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Belinda. As Belinda said, my name is Julie Watson, and I work at Edinburgh University. I'm a researcher there, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about my PhD, which I finished last year, or 2015, which was about relationship-centred care with people with dementia in care homes. So I'll give you a little bit of the backstory, where I've come from, and what my where I'm coming from in terms of relationship-centred care. Then I'll share some of the research findings with you and relate that to the census framework. And then I just want to finish then with a question, really, what does this inside story mean for you? All of us here work in care, might not work in giving hands-on face-to-face care, but whether you work in the care inspectorate or whether you work in education, all of those things are part of the care process. So just to be thinking, as I'm presenting these findings, what does this mean for me in my role? So just a little bit about where I've come from. I was a hospice nurse, started off as a hospice nurse, and then I worked on a couple of research projects looking at developing palliative care and end-of-life care in care homes, and as Belinda said, one of those was with her, so she's had a big influence on the direction of my life, which I really appreciate. And then I was keen to move into research, and I had the opportunity to do a PhD which was looking at supporting relationships with people living and dying with dementia in care homes. And as I set out on that, I realised I really didn't know anything about dementia. I had very little experience of caring for people with dementia or any personal experience, so I had to kind of go into the dementia world and try and understand a bit about dementia care and what was going on there. And I think one of the key things that stood out for me when I was doing that was this whole issue of how, which I felt was very important for relationship-centred care, was the whole issue of how people with dementia become marginalised within their relationships, within their communities, and even within their own families. They start to kind of become quite marginalised. So it's almost like they start to become invisible. And I was trying to kind of read around that and understand how does that happen and why does that happen, and some of this thinking. There's a lot written about that, about how the label of having a diagnosis of dementia, important as that is for people, to access the right services, as soon as people get that label, they start to become marginalised within their relationships. People start to treat them differently. And then how people experience excess disability, so a disability that's not related to what's happening in their brain, not because of the disease process, but because of how other people are treating them and how the environments that they're in. People become more disabled than they actually are because of that. And what seems to be underpinning this is this term Stephen Post has coined, called the hypercognitive culture, where our culture that we live in very much values cognitive abilities, and we very much value being able to have, being able to talk, being able to remember, being able to think, and those things are what gives us value. And the other aspects of being human, such as emotional aspects or relational aspects or creative aspects, become less important. And that is an issue then for people with dementia when their cognitive abilities are they're having trouble with that. So a lot of work has addressed that issue in terms of developing dementia-friendly communities. All this great work that is going on. I think it has made a huge difference to people here in the early and mid stages of dementia. But as I was kind of thinking about my research questions and what to look at, I realised that people with advanced dementia were still very much in the shadows. And I think people with dementia in care homes are still one of the most marginalised groups of people. So these phrases like this, "This is not my dad," and that was from a young person whose father had dementia, and his feelings that he'd lost his dad, even though his dad was still alive. And it points to a lot of the grief that families experience as they see the changes in their relative, and they feel like they've lost the person. Or this quote, "There's no point in going to visit," and this is somebody whose father was in a care home, and he felt there wasn't any point of going to visit. And people frequently say things like that to me. When I say I work in dementia research, they'll say, "Oh, I don't visit anymore." Somebody last week said to me he hadn't visited his granny for 3 years in a care home because he felt there was no point in going to visit. And so while there's a lot of grief here, and we need to do a lot more, I think, to support families with this grief, the implications of this are that people with advanced dementia then experience social death before their actual physical death. And social death is where we stop being seen as being active within our relationships. So we stop being seen by other people as being able to take part in relationships. And so I was very interested in that, and this whole idea of social death and the importance of that, thinking about that within relationship-centred care, because I think it does lead to suffering. It leads to people with dementia becoming isolated and becoming ignored quite often. So I wanted to kind of look at that whole area. And I think important within that is this question of what is a person, which can seem like a very philosophical question, but actually I think it's a very practical question as well. If you think about someone saying, "This is no longer my dad," it raises this question of what is a person, and I felt that was important to consider that within my PhD, because there are other implications of that as well. It's like saying there's no point in going to visit because that person doesn't know if I'm there or not. They don't remember who I am. But if you take that thinking to its logical conclusion, you could say, "Oh, well, if that person's soiled in their bed, then does it matter because maybe they don't know?" So it's a dangerous line of thought, I think, to have that. So that's why I felt it was important to kind of grapple with that question of what is a person. And there are lots of ways of understanding what a person is, but what I find helpful was this idea of embodied selfhood, in that human beings have a body. We're not just a brain. And it seemed to me that would be very helpful when thinking about people with dementia. Sometimes people talk about dementia as being the death that leaves the body behind. But the fact is that we have a body, we live and experience the world through our body. And I found the work of Pia Contis really helpful in thinking about this. And she talks about how, our self is not just contained inside our body, our body is part of ourself. And she talks about how paying more attention to the body within dementia care can kind of expand opportunities for relationships and expand the scope of how we connect with people with advanced dementia. And also is interested in this notion of inter-embodied selfhood as well. And some of you might have seen the video clip of Gladys Naomi. It's quite well known and it's been around a while, but this person, Zeeler, kind of analyses that. And at the beginning of it, Gladys is a lady who's got very advanced dementia. She's just kind of sitting in a chair and not looking like she's able to engage really. But by the end of it, she's kind of singing along with Naomi. And what Zeeler says is that Gladys becomes who she is in the interaction. There's something kind of springs out of that interaction. And that's the same for all of us, but it maybe becomes magnified when somebody has advanced dementia. So I use those two theories really, embodied selfhood and inter-embodied selfhood, so focusing on the body as lenses as I was doing my research. But what I wanted to know then is, because care home staff, frontline or point of care home staff in care homes are constantly interacting with people with advanced dementia, and so I was interested in asking the question, what can we learn from those interactions? What can we learn from examining the ways that residents and care staff interact with each other that might help actually educate the rest of society about and challenge this notion that people with dementia are socially dead and the suffering that can go along with that. So that was kind of where I started off. So the methodology I used was appreciative ethnography. So I took on the role of a care assistant, and I spent 10 months working in a care home. So I worked alongside the staff doing hands-on care, so washing and dressing people, helping at meal times, just sitting with people and just walking around or chatting to people and just trying to get inside the life of the care home. And I think that, so I wasn't watching, I wasn't kind of standing back and watching people as if they're kind of objects in a museum. I was very much engaged with people. And I think what that did was help me to get inside the caring relationship. It was partial because obviously that wasn't my job, I wasn't working there. But it gave me a sense of what it's like to be inside that caring relationship and to be a carer and to work out, how do I build a relationship with this person? How do I help this person, or how do I wash this person, or ensure this person has a lunch? How do I do those things? So it helped me to get inside and appreciate what that was like, appreciate what it's like to build a relationship with someone with advanced dementia who you're caring for. And it also, I think, helped me to appreciate something of the residents I was meeting. And over the months that I was there, I started to appreciate them more, as their kind of personalities and individual little quirks and things started to emerge in that relationship. And I also, so I'd spent a lot of time working alongside people, observing, and also did interviews and focus groups with the staff. So I very much focused on body work, and as people go into care, as people are supported to stay at home for longer, people who are in care homes tend to be much frailer, and so body work or hands-on care of the body is a really key component of the relationship, the way that care staff and residents relate to each other. So, and I've been on a number of different courses looking at how to communicate with people with advanced dementia, and they very much focused around music or arts-based activities, which were really helpful, and I learned a lot from going to those. But I still had this question of, what's that like when you're trying to get somebody up in the morning, or if somebody doesn't want to get up in the morning, or what's it like if you're trying to feed somebody and they don't want to have what you're giving them. So I was interested in just the dynamics of that aspect of the relationship-centred care. So I focused on body work, and not a lot of work has been done on that kind of aspect of relationship-centred care, but often that's the bit that hits the headlines when things go wrong. It's the stuff to do with toileting or meal times and things. So I was interested in that. So just to come on to my findings then, to take it inside and see what I was finding when I went inside the care home. So from a task to a relationship, the emergence of the person. And I think one of the big things I found was that the staff did see hands-on care not just as a task that they had to achieve, but it was a really important way of then building relationships with residents. And Edith is saying here, I still make the point of it's not just a task at hand, this is a time when you're interacting one-to-one. So there's a recognition there that this is somebody who's able to interact, that she's caring with. It's not just like an object, a passive recipient of care. It's a person who she's interacting with one-to-one. And the staff talked a lot about how they got to know residents by experiencing them. They might read things about them or know things about their life story, but this actually experiencing them face to face was a really important part of building that relationship. And I certainly experienced that myself as well. As when I first went, I'd sit in the sitting room quite often in the afternoon with people, and it would be warm, and everyone would be snoozing, and I'd be just kind of snoozing as well. And first impressions was that there wasn't very much happening. It seemed like there wasn't really very much going on. But as time went on, and I kind of got below the surface, and people their personality started to emerge, and somebody would wink at me, or somebody would squeeze my hand, and I realised just how important these kind of really subtle things were, and that people were actually engaging. And Zoe says here, it's just trying to catch like one look. sometimes they're just looking at the room, but then it's simple things like that, trying to capture attention, and then she looks at you or she smiles at you. And so recognising it is really subtle, but actually these really subtle things are really important, and they just help to make that connection which is meaningful for the staff and for the person as well. So read all about it. Recognising symptoms, for example, pain. So this hands-on care was an important opportunity for the staff to read the body, read what was happening with the person. Like Zoe's saying here, we started noticing that Penny was rubbing her knee. You can read that there is pain in her face. And Penny was a lady who had very advanced dementia. She rarely said anything. And they had been needing to use a hoist to kind of move her from her, get her up in the morning and things. But once they recognised the pain, she got back to walking with her Zimmer again. And we know, lots of studies have been done which show that people with advanced dementia have their pain under-recognised, and they don't get the same amount of pain killers as people who have similar conditions but who don't have dementia. But I think we can really learn from the care staff here that how they are reading the body, and I think it's good to encourage them to articulate that more and make sure that they're involved in those discussions with the GP. I was talking to a dentist the other day, and she had been called into a care home to see a man who'd been rubbing his jaw, and they thought there was something wrong with his mouth, and she couldn't find anything wrong with his mouth. And then they sat down and kind of looked at what was actually going on there, and they realised that he started rubbing his jaw when he was walking around, and it was angina pain that he had that was kind of radiating up into his jaw. So just paying attention to those kind of all the little details of what people are communicating in that embodied way, and very much frontline staff are key to that. So handles to hold on to. The staff talked about how they were trying to find handles to hold on to build a relationship, or to help the caring, what they were trying to do run more smoothly for everybody. So, for example, the man who had been in the army, and so he could walk with his Zimmer, but often he'd just kind of get stuck in one spot and he couldn't get going. But when the staff said march, off he went with the Zimmer. So there was this embodied memory of being in the army. And another lady, Hilda, I was walking along with her, was trying to take her into the dining room one day, and we got stuck. We were just kind of stuck on the spot, and one of the care assistants said to me, if you hold her like you're dancing the gay Gordon. So I kind of held her like this, and sure enough, off we went. And so that was an embodied memory as well, that they were able to use that as a handle to help them care for that person better, and be in a better relationship with them rather than in a confrontational relationship. And also the kind of embodied identities. The example of the lady who always wore bed socks to bed, and so when she had her bed socks on, she was settled at night. But if she hadn't got her bed socks on, she'd be quite agitated. And I think I can relate to that myself. I always wear a ring, and if I have taken this ring off and left it somewhere, this is my mother's ring, I think, oh my goodness, where's my ring? And I'm quite agitated until I find my ring. And so just thinking about those things as well, about how, what helps us to feel like ourselves and feel kind of comfortable in our own skin. And often families would pass that kind of information on to the staff, but not always, and not all the staff thought to ask for it either. So, but some of them did, and those are really important things. Often it just got passed on word of mouth on the floor. But they did recognise the importance of these things and the difference they made. And then embodied abilities. It's amazing how old habits remain. And a care assistant said this to me one day. We were helping this lady. She'd been incontinent, and we'd got her washed, and I'd given her a cloth to wash her hands and then dry her hands. And the care assistant said, it's amazing how old habits remain. So she was able to do that. And I think one of the things to think about here is it's easy when you're busy to do things for people that maybe they can still do themselves, and I did see that happening as well, and then other people recognise the importance of letting people do things they could still do themselves. And if you think about your selfhood as being embodied, that's a really important part of supporting your sense of self and challenging social death, that you're not socially dead. I think what I'm saying here is it's not so much about promoting independence. The goal is supporting selfhood, because when people are frail, and especially when they become very weak and they're dying, they do need help with things. And so it's getting that balance between recognising that we all need care at some point, and we're actually interdependent rather than independent. Studies have been done within cancer care which have looked at that issue of bodily care, and people with cancer have said that when they get to the point where they're not able to do their bodily care themselves, they find it very dignifying for somebody to help them with that. So it's trying to get that balance, because that's also supporting selfhood between those two things. And the staff were under pressure a lot of the time. Anne is saying here, sometimes there's pressure to work faster, but I think you need to spend the time. This is the only time I get to spend with Lillian. So she valued that time that she had getting Lillian up in the morning, but there was a tension for them. Because it's difficult when you're getting somebody up and you know that there's 4 other people waiting as well, and they might be buzzing. But I really like this phrase, slow work of gentleness. Some of you might have read this book about Gilead, and she talks about the slow work of gentleness. And I think we do need to bear in mind when we're thinking about staffing levels in care homes that this is slow work. It's very difficult to speed up somebody who's got dementia. It's very difficult to work quickly with people who are weak and frail. I think when dementia is layered on top of frailty, everything takes longer. So the slow work of gentleness. And then embodied autonomy. Do we take it seriously? So what do I mean by that? So I think what I'm meaning there is the choices that people are maybe communicating in embodied ways. So for example, the person who's spitting out their food, or this person who's in the dining room and getting up and walking away and being brought back and sat down. I saw that happening, and it causes a lot of tensions for the staff, and I felt that with myself as I was trying to feed. I was helping a lady one morning with her breakfast, and she kept spitting it out on the table, and I think as a carer you feel like if somebody eats their breakfast, then you've done a good job, and if somebody's spitting it out, you feel like you've not done a good job. And I certainly felt that. So it's about thinking, what is that person communicating? Maybe the porridge is horrible, it's lumpy, or it's cold, or maybe that person's tastes have changed and they no longer like porridge when they used to like porridge, or maybe they're actually ill that day, or maybe they're actually dying as well. And I did see situations where when somebody was maybe on that cusp between living and dying, and the staff are trying to work out, is this person, have they just got a wee bug and they're going to recover, which certainly did happen, or is this person actually dying? What would happen is that the person would be brought to the dining room, and one day I saw a care assistant sitting for probably a couple of hours trying to encourage somebody to have their breakfast and have their tablets, trying to work out, is this person at the end of life now? And those are weighty issues for frontline care staff to deal with, and they're dealing with those day in, day out. So I suppose I'm just raising a question here, is how do we take those communications that people, those embodied communications that people are communicating seriously? And there's no easy answer there, I don't think, but how do we include those in conversations with families about end-of-life decision making, or about the goals of care, and ensure that the people who are at the very front line are involved in those, and are able to kind of articulate some of those things that are happening, and maybe take which are perhaps communicating what that person wants. And that again challenges this idea of social death, that people are actually actively engaged in their relationships. So then moving back onto embodied selfhood, this idea of being with other people, and that something we become fully ourselves when we're with other people, and how that can be difficult when the care homes are very busy, So this resident said to me, let's do things together. So there's this desire to be with other people and be doing things and just be with me. This was a resident who she was sitting one morning in the care home in the sitting room on her own, and I went, and she was quite agitated, kind of sitting on the edge of her seat and just not settled, and I kind of went and sat with her, and she rarely spoke. She had very advanced dementia, and I said, is there anything I can do to help you? And she said, just be with me. So it's just this desire to be with somebody, and what that gives us a sense of ourselves and who we are. And then there's another lady, she said this to the care assistant told me she'd said this one day. She was in her bedroom getting her ready for bed, and she'd gone into just her ensuite to wash her false teeth, and the lady started wailing, and she said, you went away and left me. I didn't want you to go away and leave me. So just this need to be with another person. And that was difficult for the staff. John says here, it feels horrible, but you can't sit all day with one person. And there's also this recognition that the staff could feel, the residents could feel the feelings of the staff. So that was, they weren't talking about their feelings, but they could feel it in that embodied way. So if the staff were stressed, the residents could feel that. And so just recognising this, the importance that their feelings are intertwined and their lives are intertwined. And Vera here is saying they are part of your life as much as you're part of theirs. So this intertwining of the lives of the staff and the residents in the care home, which I think comes back then to the census framework and the importance of relationship-centred care and paying attention to the needs of residents and staff. And I know families are part of that as well, but they weren't part of my study. But just that there's this interconnection. So what I've done then is try to take some of those examples and use them to sort of try and understand what does the body teach us about relationships. And I've added to the census framework some of these findings, kind of developed it a little bit. And it's in a paper there, you can get that, it's free online. But I'm just going to go through each of these sentences now and just give a little snapshot example of what I've added as a result of these, as a result of this research. And these are just kind of more practical ways, I suppose, that anyone can kind of use the idea of and realise the importance of the body. So a sense of security, to feel safe. So recognising that the feelings of people with dementia and those who care for them are intertwined, and that organised emotional care is needed to provide opportunities for staff to talk as a team and critically reflect on emotionally or ethically challenging situations and decisions, including around end-of-life care. So just a safe place to say, oh, I feel horrible, I can't sit with Jeannie, and that makes me feel horrible. Or I couldn't get somebody to take their medication last night and I've come in this morning and they've died. Is it something I've done? So being able to talk about those tricky situations which are very emotional and often might be the reason why people don't want to stay in care homes. That's what makes them leave. So giving them that safe space to talk about those things. So a sense of belonging, to feel part of things. So this is the kind of mindset of being open to connecting to people with dementia, recognising that the person with dementia is open to connecting as well. So that's about paying attention, which I've learnt, that's what I saw these staff doing. And that the person is fully present. They're not just an object that you're caring for who's passively receiving care. They're in an interaction and continuing to be able to take part in relationships in a meaningful way. So, and a sense of continuity, to experience links and connection. So recognising the importance of these embodied memories and bodily routines, so such as dancing the gig ordinance or making sure you've got your bed socks on. And a sense of purpose, to have personally valuable goals to aspire to. So recognising that supporting selfhood can be a therapeutic goal of dementia care and care homes. So, and again, I would bring the challenging social death into that. So ensuring that people with dementia are able to be socially alive until the end of their lives. a sense of achievement, to make progress towards these goals. So recognising that hands-on bodywork is not just a task, that, not just ticking off a list of who's been to the toilet or who's had their lunch, but it's actually part of this overall therapeutic goal of supporting selfhood. And the sense of significance, to feel that you matter as a person. So recognising the intertwining of the feelings in the day-to-day lives of residents and staff, and that both matter in the caring relationship. So I think to finish then, I think what these findings show is that people with advanced dementia aren't socially dead, and I think they show that by trying to appreciate what happens in that caring relationship between staff and residents in care homes, that it really reinforces that that idea that we can still relieve suffering at that stage in life. And I think that's one aspect of palliative care that's maybe been a bit neglected, this idea of supporting people who are socially dead and keep holding those people in relationship until the end of life. So just to leave you again with that question of that we're all carers. We might not be the person who's doing the washing or at that point of care, but all of us have a role to play in that caring process. And so just to leave you with that question to think of for yourselves, what does this mean for you? What are the implications for you, whether you're writing policy, whether you're in the care inspectorate, whether you're teaching student nurses or health and social care staff? What difference does that make for you? Thank you.